What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me already, I'm Hannah Dawson. I am a transformation coach. I help women have a healthy relationship with their bodies, with food, through teaching you how to train with a purpose, how to eat with a purpose, and how to have faith through the process, because it truly is about the process. It truly is about the journey. It truly is about building that relationship, restoring that relationship with yourself before anything else can be attainable or maintained. And so today is my faith story, you guys. Today I really wanted to share how I got saved, what brought me to this place where I am today, because I would not be here if it was not for the grace of God, if it was not that I said that word, I said that powerful name, Jesus. If I did not say that name, I would not have been saved, and I would not be here today to be sharing with you my story. And so that's what this video is about. I want to share kind of what Jesus has done through my life, and just, in hopes to encourage you, to inspire you, and to ignite your faith that there is a God, that Jesus is real. I've been feeling this on my heart to share for a while. I've been procrastinating it because, it's not just one specific moment, you guys, that was like, boom, and my whole life changed. It was a series of moments of, one step forward, 20 steps back, one good decision forward, and then one temptation decision that led me down, a really dark road, and then bringing me back again. But the main theme to this is that Jesus always brought me back. He never left my side. From the time I was that 7-year-old girl that said, Mom, I want to ask Jesus into my heart. I was curious. I can't explain it. I've always had this faith in me. I've always had this thing that has ignited my belief to believe that there's something beyond right here. From the time I was a little girl, and I grew up in a pretty chaotic, unhealthy life and environment, but I had a few amazing people in my life that really loved on me. One being my grandpa and grandma that I lived with. Just amazing. They had such an influence in my faith journey. My grandma, for sure. My grandpa really, I believe having my grandpa as a role model in and out of my life is why I married the man that I did. Very stable and very loving and stuff. And so I have them to thank. And then I had a really strong, my auntie, my mom's sister, was a amazing influence in my life. She was like another mom to me, and I lived with her a lot too. I went back and forth between my mom, my aunt, my grandma. So, and then now my mom has been, whether she made good decisions or bad decisions, and she made, lots of bad decisions, but she also did make good decisions too. And so I learned from both of those. And throughout the theme of my life, I've always had those people in my life loving me, no matter how ugly it got, no matter if they knew what was going on or not. I always had those people there, whether I recognized it at the time or not. Now, having kids, I understand a lot more than I did maybe, let's say, 10 years ago. And so 7 years old was the first time I gave my life to Jesus, and then it was a uphill battle from there. I went back, my mom got back into drugs, and I'm not going to get too into that, but I'm not going to put the focus on her, because my biggest battle was with myself. I never was an ugly girl, and I probably was a very smart girl, but because of the life I grew up in, I never thought of myself that way. So I was always striving for this external gratification. And from the time I was a little girl, about looks and being pretty, and I wanted to be a model from the time I was like really little. I said I wanted to be a model. And I just struggled with my self-esteem so much, with my relationship with food, with food was a way I dealt with things. I got into having an eating disorder at a pretty young age, and then dealing with that, and then getting into the gym. I found the gym at a pretty young age too, which was good, but I never was taught about this relationship with yourself. And so I really battled with, you know, obsessive compulsive behaviors, because that's all I've seen around me. Even though I made these healthy decisions at a young age and the gym was my safe haven, I still had really unhealthy behaviors. So the workouts became addictive because they changed my appearance, which got me this certain attention, but also because it was something I could control in my life when everything was chaotic. So it became this healthy thing that was meant for benefiting my body, and it ended up warping my mind. Image distortion. It ended up distorting the way I've seen myself, not just physically, but emotionally, my character, everything. So everything was based on never feeling good enough. And so all my decisions, therefore, came out of a place of never feeling loved. And so I made a lot of poor decisions. I didn't make good decisions too, but you know, living with my aunt and my grandma and stuff gave me kind of my faith. You know, I went to church with them, and their kids went to youth, and so I really did see that, and so that always kind of kept me strong. But living in a small town, I grew up most of the time. I moved a lot growing up, almost every year of my life, but the longest place I lived was Kimberley, BC, in the Rocky Mountains. And so there's not a lot of churches there. There's not a lot of people that are faith-filled, and if there are, it's very not like it would be here in Edmonton, like when we go to church and things like that. There's just not a lot there for the youth. And so my friends made fun of me. I came from living with my auntie and going to church and youth and doing you know, these cool things that, you know, were for God, and then coming into an environment where that was nowhere to be found. And I had friends call me Bible thumper and like make fun of me, and I would laugh and let them make fun of me, and I thought it was funny, you know, at the time. But it really did hurt my heart, because like I said, from that time I was a little girl, I loved Jesus. I loved him. I can't explain it, but I just, you know, I just had this softness inside me that just had this belief that every time I let it out, there was just all these people around me that, you know, made fun of it. So it's something that I hid. It's something that I was too afraid to talk about. It's something I was too afraid to share because of being rejected. It was the best part about me, but it was the part that I hid because it was the part that people made fun of. And so I dealt with it in different ways, made lots of bad decisions to fit into the crowd, to fit in, to become popular and things like that. From silly things like getting all these different piercings to wearing clothes that maybe didn't highlight me in the best way, to, you know, making really poor decisions with friends, choosing friends and things like that. The friends that weren't really my friends, but I hung out with because it was the cool thing to do. At a young age, I got a boyfriend, a pretty serious boyfriend, for being that young. I was 15, and his family was great, and I was going through a really hard time in my life, in my home life. So I moved out at a young age with him, and I had to grow up really fast. And I remember this one time, one of my really best friends, she got a car, and she was an only child, and I was so devastated. I just thought, God, like, I just remember my mom was addicted to drugs. I was living on my own with my boyfriend at the time. I thought, I'm never gonna get to experience these things. I'm just not going to. Never mind my parents buy me a car. Like, I can't even like do the things that kids get to do, just worry about school. And I went through quite a bit of depression that I didn't even know that I was going through at the time. And I remember saying this one prayer, and I said to God, God, it's not fair. I just want a car. Like I'm 18. My friend got a car. She doesn't even have her license yet. I just want a car. And I remember my stepdad a little while later buying me a car, and that was pretty amazing. And that was just a little glimpse of, him answering one of my prayers. And you can say it as luck or whatever, but I believe that I said that little prayer, and he was my father, and he took care of that one need of mine. And so that was the start of it. But my intention with God then wasn't a relationship. It was just ask for what I want and hope that he answers like a genie. And so, I couldn't live. Like, I had these dreams. Like I said, I wanted to be a model. I wanted to work in the movies. I wanted to do makeup and hair, and that wasn't going to happen in Kimberly. And so I had to make the decision, do I stay with the boyfriend that I had, which was very stable. His family was amazing. His stepmom had such an amazing influence in my life. She was just so amazing, so loving, the most kind, loving woman. And she didn't have any daughters, so she just loved on me. And so it was like, do I stay and become what he wants me to be? Because he was a hunter, and he had my life planned out. I was going to be a cook in the camp. And I was such a girly girl. I'm like, you gotta be kidding. Like, there's no way I'm going to stay and live like that. Like, I have these dreams. Like I said, from the time I was a little girl, I had these dreams. I visualized. I was a dreamer. And like, I was strong-willed and stubborn, which got me into so much trouble, but also got me to where I am today. And so I had to break up with him. I decided to move to Vancouver because that's where my dad lived, in Langley. And I'd finish my grade 12 there, and then I would go to work in the movies and get into makeup and hair and everything. And going from a small town and seeing, the decisions my mom was making, which drove me to go to the gym, which drove me to be more responsible, to now living in a city like Vancouver, Langley, where there's so much more influence. And so I fell into a bad crowd, fell into many bad decisions, instantly spiraled from the minute that I got there. Things just spiraled out of control. I got kicked out of my dad's house. I fell away from believing in God. I remember telling him that I did not believe in him anymore. I remember the moment I said it to, I said, God, you can't be there if this is happening. I feel so alone. I feel like I have no purpose. I've made all these decisions up to that point that I just, I had so much shame and so much guilt, and I just didn't know how to get out of it. And I really fell hard. And this is part of my faith journey, because God always had somebody to come in. And that's what I mean. If you're looking for him, he'll be there. And it's sometimes not in the way that you think that he will, but he will. And there was this lady that worked in a gym, and I had worked out at that gym for a while, and I kind of had been sharing, the things that I was going through. And she said, you know what, Hannah, come and live with me. I have a room, you can rent a room. And looking back, I know that was God, saying, I haven't given up on you. I'll give you another chance, but you need to get your crap together. And by this point, I had been partying, doing drugs, and I decided, I'm going to choose to get my life together. So I moved in with her. I got a job landscaping. Before, I was working at doing reception work at a Sea to Sky Motorsports. And I was getting my schooling to become a personal trainer, but I was really struggling with it because, like I said, I really struggled with my appearance. So I just had so much self-doubt. I just had so much, I didn't think that I could become a trainer anymore because I had kind of let my body go. I was into drugs and drinking. I'd racked up credit cards like you wouldn't believe. I was pulling money out on credit cards. I just had really gotten myself into a real mess. And so this lady said, just, come and move in with me. She's the most kind lady. She's an English lady, had an accent. She was really into fitness too. So she taught classes. And so she was an influence in my life too, and took me in at a crucial moment in my life where I could have turned and never came back. But I decided to. And like I said, my mom was in Kimberly kind of going through drugs and things like that. But at that moment, she decided to come to rehab in Vancouver and get better. And so at that moment, I had been living with that lady, and she was an amazing lady. I was landscaping. I would literally rollerblade because I lost my car at this point. Like I said, I got myself in so much trouble. So I had to rollerblade to work. And then I had to do labor landscaping. So we had to like mow lawns, like pull weeds. It wasn't the pretty landscape, it was like the labor landscaping. Got in the best shape of my life. I had to work. Mentally, it was so good for me. And I had a stable place to come back to. And she helped me get me back into eating healthy and fitness, and I was feeling really good. And so then I asked her, I said, my mom gets weekends off. Can she come and stay with me? She's in recovery. And she said, absolutely not. And so I was devastated. I was angry at her, but now looking back, I can understand why, having an addict in your house, they can have behaviors that you just don't want to have your kids around. She had a son and a daughter. Her daughter didn't live there anymore, but I understand now. Everything makes sense now. But this is kind of where my faith journey really began. My Auntie Susan had a neighbor, Jeanette, and her daughter lived in North Van. And so Auntie Susan said, Judith would love, because Judith knew me when I was younger, says, why don't you and your mom go and spend the weekend with her and you guys can go to church? And so I ended up going there every weekend, you guys, for I think about a month, staying with Judith. My mom would go, and then I just eventually started going by myself. And the pastor there had 4 kids, and his oldest daughter, Candace, was married. And they lived in Seymour Mountain in a beautiful home, and they had a suite in their home. They had it was such a beautiful home, but the whole basement was a built-in suite if someone wanted to rent out. And so at this point, they said, why don't you move here? They had somebody that went to the church that worked at World Fitness or Fitness World there at a gym, and I had been taking my personal training past. And so they would get me a job at the gym. So it was like, I rededicated my life to Jesus at that point. That was like a defining moment for me. I said, I want to follow you when I started going to the church. And then so I decided to move there to North Van. And I moved in with the pastor's oldest daughter and her husband for free. They didn't charge me rent. And this is what I mean by God always will give me give opportunities to open a door to come back. He was always there when I was ready to surrender, and I did. And so he got me this job. He opened the door for me to work in a gym. I got to live in a beautiful home with the pastor's daughter and her husband for free. Things started to look up. I started to have such a fire for Jesus. I remember reading the Bible, and everything just was watering my soul. It was like when you're so thirsty and you drink water and you just feel like you can't get enough. That's what reading the Bible was doing for me. And before I had moved there, when I was just going there on the weekends, when I was working for the landscaping company, the guy that I worked for, he's an older man, and I would read my Bible in the vehicle while we were going to different areas that we had to work on. And and he was starting to get curious, and I remember sharing my faith with him, and it was just so cool to see and to feel that power, to feel the power and the presence of God in those moments when you're like, how? This guy doesn't believe in God at all, but all of a sudden he's being affected by me reading the Bible and by this joy I can't explain. I wanted to share with everybody about this joy that I was feeling. And so fast forward to living back in North Van, the pastor had 4 kids. He had 3 daughters and 1 son, Jonathan, and his son was gorgeous model. And I remember thinking, oh man, I would love to date him. And it was like God just gave me everything I wanted. Everything from the job to the guy to this amazing pastor family. They just accepted me as their own. And then I went through some things as a new Christian, as believing in God. It's like in a new relationship when you are feeling all the good feelings. and just being in denial that there's going to be some challenging things. And so I ended up going through some challenging things and not, talking about it or reaching out for help. And so what happens when you do that is I isolated myself. I started making not good decisions, excuse me, in the sense that um, just little decisions. It's those little decisions that can propel you forward, or just pull you down. And so little things that now, if I could encourage you, if whoever that is listening to this, if this is something and you're at the beginning of your faith journey, just know that you're going to go through those small temptations when you first give your life to God. He's going to fill you. He's going to answer you. The word of God is going to come to life with you. But there's also an enemy, and there's also the darkness that does not want that light in you. And he'll come in the most deceptive ways to tempt you. And I really wanted to share that because that happened to me. And I just wish I would have had someone there go, okay, yes, you're on fire, but just know that there's the darkness sees that light and it wants to put it out. And in the beginning, that light isn't strong enough. It needs to be surrounded by other believers to keep that light going, to keep that flame going, because it can easily go out. And so, not all his kids were, I was really close with all his kids. Bethany, she was really great and she was on fire for God. But his youngest, Naomi. But his youngest, so there's Candace, there's Naomi, Jonathan, and Bethany. Bethany was the baby, and she was closest to my age. And she was in the makeup industry, and kind of the wild one out of all of them. They all went through their phases, but the oldest were out of those phases and into serving God and things like that, had more of a solid foundation. But Bethany was a wild one. And for some reason, she was my age, and I was just attracted to the lifestyle. And I remember the oldest sister kind of saying, Hannah, I love my sister, but she may not be the best influence. I remember going, I can handle this. And, I had only been clean and sober for maybe 4 months. And I felt she was a party girl. And so not knowing that, not really understanding alcoholism and drug addiction and stuff, I fell right back into it really hard, to the point where I fell so deep and so hard that the church, kind of just left me. I moved out of Candace's because they were moving into a new home. And me and Bethany thought it would be a great idea to live together. We are so close, but we were not good for one another. We are wild together. We wanted to party. We wanted to go to the clubs. It was the cool thing to do. She was beautiful. There's so much, that just was just so, at my age, was so important. It felt important at that time. When you're in your 20s, what you wear, what you have, who you hang out with, how you look just seems so important in your 20s, but can be so deceptive and so toxic. And I wish I would have known now what I know then, but I didn't. And that's what, led me to where I am today. And I fell really hard, got into crazy drug addiction, even worse than the first time. Her family moved her out of the apartment. I ended up just leaving and got into brothels and things like that, and just a lifestyle that I never could ever imagine myself getting in. And here I was in the darkest of the darkest of the dark. And in those moments, I just remember, I'd come back to the word and come back to praying. And I think that's when I felt God the strongest, was in my darkest. In those darkest moments, I felt him the most, whether he showed himself to me supernaturally when I seen angels and demons, to the point where he would just send random people, would do acts of kindness for me, would reach out and just do kind things for me, things that were just out of the blue, very supernatural. Like you're like, what just happened? Like when they call like I'm losing my train of thought, like miracles, like those little miracles. Miracles aren't always like these huge things that are obvious. There's miracles that he does every day if you're willing to pay attention. And it was those people that you know, fed into me, that called me randomly, that brought me a meal, that there's just those moments, those defining moments. And I really fell super hard, but at that moment was when I knew God was so real. And anyways, I'm not going to get into that huge story, but I got into drug addiction really bad and alcoholism, and the moment I remember, like I said, God came to me supernaturally. I mean, in dreams. I've had dreams like I can't even explain. And I think for me, there was many different things that ignited my faith in God. From one time, you know, I just remember feeling so lost and so broken, and sitting in my apartment, and I just remember falling on my knees and going, God, I don't know how I got here, but I need to get out. I need your help. And I just heard that little voice, call your dad. And I hadn't talked to my dad in years at this point, because I got kicked out when I first moved down when I was 18. And then I was 22 at this time, 21, I think, 21. Yeah, I was 21, and I just heard call your dad, and I called my dad, and I just said, Dad, and I didn't even get my words out, you guys, and he said, come home. He didn't even know where I had been, what I was doing, but he just said, come home. And so another moment that I'm like, okay, when God is always there, it doesn't matter how bad you think you've been, how horrible decisions that you've made. He's not a God that will punish you. He's a God that has grace. He's a God that will be there for you. All you have to do is call his name. All you have to say is, I'm ready. I need you. God made you to need him. And that was the theme throughout my whole life. I would always try to do it on my own, then realize I came back to this place of admitting, of surrendering. I need you, God. And so I lived with my dad again, got myself back on my feet again, started working in a spa. Like I said, all these random things just came into place. Not random, God moments. I got a job in a spa, being a personal trainer. Was surrounded with amazing mentors. Again, just these people that were placed in my life. One lady in particular, her name is Joan. And just this lady just had, you know, this life, and she had kids around my age and a little bit older, and just had such an influence in my life to give me a picture of what I wanted for my life, or what I could have for my life, right? And then again, I was making bad decisions, and again fell off. It was like this, like I would do good and then not do good, and do good and not do good, until I fully fell back into that dark lifestyle that I got pulled out of when I first reached out to my dad. And then the last time I decided was 10 and a half years ago, maybe almost 11 now. And I was at a friend's house, and if you guys have heard my videos, you've heard this story. And I felt this heaviness, this darkness, and I can't explain it, but it was a feeling that if I didn't get out from where I was living, that I would die. And I just felt this darkness, and I could feel it. And I just remember a lady at church saying, if you ever feel scared, just say Jesus. And I remember whispering in the bed, and my friend was laying beside me. She was sleeping. We had been partying for days. And I said, Jesus. And all of a sudden, I could feel this warmth. I looked up. There was this angel, like this bright angel, but there was like a movie screen, and it was all these different relatives that, like, I can't explain. I knew who they were, but I couldn't, like, it wasn't like a vivid picture. They looked like little ghosts. I can't explain it. It was like kind of like foggy, and they're all praying for me. And at that moment, I said to God, okay, I know what to do. And I knew I had to move to Edmonton. I don't know why, but I just knew I did. And I told my cousins, I called and I said, I'm moving to Edmonton. It was literally the quickest decision. And about a month and a half later, I moved here to Edmonton. It was done so fast. I gave up the life, did not have to go to rehab. I did not have to do any of that. I made that decision. And again, I moved here moved in with my cousins, had a friend that I could rent a room from. Again, I don't think they knew how bad I was at the time, that I was heavily addicted to drugs, working in brothels, just really just a broken girl, just a mess. All that stuff that I went through as a child and never dealt with, the decisions I made as a teenager, all that shame, all that stuff just compiled up, and I made broken decisions. And I ran to drugs and I ran to alcohol and all these things to numb the pain, because I just didn't want to feel the pain anymore. And it was to that point where I'm like, I can't do this anymore, God. I need you. I can't keep doing this anymore. My cousins, my auntie that I lived with, her boys and all their wives lived in Edmonton, and they just had these lives that was the life I wanted. I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to be married. I wanted all that so bad, but I just kept running in the opposite direction. I just kept thinking of all the things I didn't want to be, and I kept running into all the things I didn't want to be, until I made that decision. And I literally had to leave everything, you guys. It took me 3 days to get on that plane. I slept a couple of days. I felt like I'd been hit with tranquilizers. Like, I couldn't seem to get up. It was like something supernatural was trying to stop me from moving to Edmonton. I missed my plane. I eventually had no money. By the third time I had to rebook my plane. They wouldn't let me book it again. I had to borrow money from my cousins to pay for the plane ticket. Oh, and I left all my stuff behind, like left it. I packed some clothes, I left my furniture, I left the rest of my clothes. I just left everything and moved to Edmonton. And then I was living with my cousin's friends, which, man, she must have just thought I was such a mess. I had no money, couldn't pay her rent. I just was still a broken mess, but God, was good and gave her obviously grace to have me there. And I got a job at Good Life Fitness as a trainer. It was like, again, he was bringing me back, and like, it was like there was just so much love. I can't explain. Like, there, okay, let's do this again. Let's start again. Okay, you can have that personal training job. Boom, you get it. You have a place to live. Okay, I will provide for you. My cousins helped me out so much with giving me odd jobs to make money. And still, I didn't make the best of the decisions because I was a broken person. I never really, I would go and see the counselors in the church and things like that. I always wanted to work on myself. I always had this thing from the time I was a little girl to always want more. Like I said, to be a dreamer, but always had this thing to always want to share and to learn about people's stories and to open up. I always had this a spirit of vulnerability and sharing with people. And I always wanted, okay, if I share this, will I get healing? Like, I just want to be healed. I just want to feel better. And that was the beginning. That was 10 and a half years ago. I moved here, and I started working in a gym, and again, making so not good decisions again. Like, it started off good, and then I started again getting tempted with, temptations and kids going out that are not kids, but like the young adults at work, the other coworkers that I worked with at the gym, start drinking, and there I slowly slip again, to the point where this guy kept asking me on a date. And, I just felt, I guess, at a vulnerable place, lonely. I didn't even like the guy, but I thought, you know what, hey, get a free meal out of it. Like, yes, I was selfish then, you guys, very selfish. And then I got really drunk on this date and decided that it would be a good idea to go to the strip club, because that's just the life that I used to live. So that's when drinking. And so decided to go to the strippers with this guy, and ended up, getting into drinking even more. Got just really wasted and decided to do drugs there. So then I started doing drugs at the strippers. I'm being totally real with you guys, because this is not sugar coated. This is what I did with. There was two guys there, and the one of the guys that was in that strip club was my husband today. That sounds so bad. And then I was on a date, and I just made really bad decisions. And so I went and sat at their table. And the guy that I was with on the date turned out to be actually not very nice, kind of scary. So it was good that Adam was there. And Adam has his own story, and it's kind of cool. And we both have kind of similar paths in the decisions we made, so it's kind of cool. And why I'm telling you this now is I ended up meeting my husband that night, and I went home with him that night, and we fell in love instantly. Like, it was instantaneous. The next day we found out we had the exact same birthday. He was just 6 years older. He told me on his way to drive me home the next day that what did he say? I feel like I've known you for my whole life. And it was so cute, but it did feel that way. It was just really weird. And why I wanted to say that is my husband was sober at that point. He was just in the strip club because a buddy got out of jail and got in a fight with his wife. So he said, let's go to strippers. And that's what my husband used to do. We have crazy pasts. And so he happened to be there that night. He hasn't drunk, didn't do drugs, but there was me falling apart again. And why I wanted to share all of that with you guys is to know that, like, God had something here for me, and I was obedient in the fact that it took everything to get me here, but I knew that he was calling me away from Vancouver into this place. And I listened. I literally left everything behind, did not look back, left everything behind, and I slowly started to make those decisions again. But he had my husband here for me. And so it was almost the way I feel in my heart is like, Hannah, you were obedient. You're trying to fall away, but I'm not going to let you. I'm not going to let you. You know what? The enemy can mean so much for your harm. There I ended up in pretty much, I call it the devil's playground, the strip club. In the strip club, and God's like, nope, I can still control the situation. Boom, let's put your husband there. For some reason, he ended up there that night, and because of that, I met him. I'm now clean and sober because he said, I will not be with someone that drinks. Like, you cannot drink. And I'm like, you know what, good, because I came here to get clean and sober, and I can't be with anybody that doesn't go to church, so you have to go to church with me. And so that's kind of how our journey started together, and our faith journey. And 8 months later, I got pregnant with Madison. We really wanted kids. I know, again, we did it what do you call it, non-traditional. And then we got married 3 weeks before we had her, and then we had a second about a year later. And our journey together with God has been a dance as well, but I just kept pursuing God through that whole time, and it never looks the same. It never is the same. It's always changing. But God saved me, you guys. He never left me. Even my darkest moments, he did anything to, you could be high as a kite on drugs, and if you just say the name of Jesus, he'll do some pretty cool things. I have some pretty cool stories too about when, I used to, supernaturally, guys, like, I believe it with all of my heart, that there is a world in front of you that you don't see. The supernatural is more than the world we see now. To the point where I was reading a Bible one time in a drug dealer's home. That was my boyfriend at that time, reading my Bible because I was feeling some darkness come on. I've always experienced supernatural things, to the point where his dog started arcing, like not barking, like making those weird sounds. My Bible's pages started flying open, and his deck balcony door flew open. I started reading those pages from that Bible because I started feeling that darkness, and then all of a sudden that happened. And those little moments are kept what pulling me back to the light. Like, I was saved. When you get saved, when you accept Jesus in your heart, you are stamped. You are stamped by the kingdom of heaven, by the King. You are stamped with his stamp. Like, the darkness sees it, and it will always try to come against it, but it can never take you. It will try to take you, but it can't. And so I want to tell kind of a cool story of, this is before my husband met me. So when I first moved here, I made my first friend, Alicia, and we just had a really cool bond and connection. And it was like God had that special friend for me. And so at the church, she says, do you want to come to Holy Spirit Day at the church? It's, when you get baptized in the Holy Spirit, because Jesus is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, right? The 3 in 1. And so I said yes, because I wanted to be healed of depression. I was going through depression pretty bad, and anxiety. And so I had hands being laid on me, prayed over me, so that day that we left the church that day, we're driving. We live in Edmonton, so we were on Gateway, in between Gateway and Calgary Trail. There's like a little road there, and all of a sudden, I can't explain it, but it was like what was happening physically, I could see in the spirit realm, like, you know, like in the Matrix when things slow down and happen. Her car stops in the middle of nowhere, and the car behind us goes spun in circles. And in that moment, spiritually, God gave me a vision of the enemy of darkness so mad that he got so mad and like had a tantrum, right? Because I finally had got saved. I was where God wanted me to go. I was filled with the Holy Ghost at that moment. It didn't matter how angry the darkness got that he protected me. The car just stopped. It wouldn't start. The car behind us spun. Crazy weird. Like I said, you want to experience supernatural, I mean, God will, if your eyes are open, there's some pretty crazy things that will happen. But in that moment, we both looked at each other. We were both like, we didn't say anything, but we knew it. Like, we could feel it. And at that moment, I just felt like I was at the right place that I needed to be. And that God, you know, when he brings you somewhere, when you listen to that voice, when you hear that still small voice, it may seem so crazy. It may mean like really make you feel fearful and like, yeah, I got to make the step like to move here, you guys. It wasn't just like, yeah, I'm going to move here and it was easy. There was so much fear. There was so much. I had a boyfriend at the time. He was super verbally abusive to me because of the lifestyle I got caught in. I was just stuck in this unhealthy relationship. I was stuck in this unhealthy life. I was stuck to my things, like what I was going to do. I had to take a step of faith and release, surrender, and be like, hey, God, this is where you're calling me. And even through that, you know, there was moments of temptation moving here, these moments, these creepy thoughts, these lies that would just creep in and try to pull me farther. But when God has you where he wants you, nothing can come against you. It may try. The enemy tried to come against me many times, but God always swooped in and rescued me, always threw in somebody to say a word, always had somebody to lay their hands on me, always had somebody to speak into my life. And then my husband, and that's a whole other testimony for another time, but I can say my decision of moving to Edmonton 2 years later, my mom moved here. She got saved. She is now clean and sober for 6 or 7 years now, I believe. Clean and sober to this day. We have an awesome relationship. And I wonder if my one decision to be obedient and following the call that God had put in my heart, my life, had a ripple effect. You know how they'll say it'll have a ripple effect down generations? I believe you can have a ripple effect into generations that are above you too. I believe that there is no limit to God's power, that if you are willing to believe in the supernatural, supernatural things will start happening. I believe that God is the God of the universe, that if you pray to the universe, God is the one that controls the universe, so you're more going to benefit from praying to the guy that controls the universe, that controls the energy. Those are things we can see with our eyes. You know, not everybody has seen God. It's something that you have to choose to believe. But when you choose to believe, he will reward you in areas of your life. I live in such a beautiful home now. I'm not bragging. I am blessed. I'm so grateful. I have 2 amazing daughters. I have an amazing studio that I get to work from. I get to, stay home with my girls and work from home. We have just this amazing life, but it's not all, it's not all this perfect. I still battle with depression daily. I still battle with my image and body dysmorphia and those things I have to surrender to God every day. You guys, every day I have to say, God, please remove the distorted mirrors from my eyes. Please remove distortions from me so I can see what you want me to see today, so I can be who you want me to be today. Did I want to share this testimony? I have been. He's put it on my heart, and I've been procrastinating. But you know what? As I'm sharing my journey with God. And you guys, it will always get better. You know, you're going to have things that are just, you're going to be more aware. When God comes into your life, you're more aware of your habits and hang-ups that aren't so healthy, but that's where he can come in and he can give you the grace to deal with it. If you just ask, it's all about just surrendering. It's all about humbling yourself and just saying, you know what, I need you, God. I can't do this without you. And just saying that, and he will come in and he will do what he needs to do. And I wouldn't have this life today without God. And I said to God, I remember praying a long time ago about this life. And now I have this life. And I felt like him saying on my heart, now you need to share. You need to share that, you know, I for many years, and you know, I had to ask for forgiveness for this. I would say, you know, fitness saved me, fitness saved me. Fitness never saved me. God saved me. God was always there. He always, whether he brought a person into my life, whether he brought fitness into my life, whether he always had these anchors for me to pull myself back out of, like this chain to get out of the mud, to get out of the pit I was in. He always, there's a rope, come on, let's climb back out. And so fitness was one of those ropes. There was strong mentors that were some of those ropes. Some family members were some of those ropes that helped me get out. I always seemed to fall back into that pit, you know, being like a silly kid, like I won't fall in, and then boom, you know, the dancing with those temptations, dancing, flirting with the devil, so to speak. We do these things thinking that we'll be fine. Then we get stuck in a mess again, and we're like, this is why. And then God's like, okay, I throw down the rope. Are you ready to come up? And sometimes we choose to grab it, and sometimes we choose to stay where we are. That's up to us. Sometimes our pride is too big to say, okay, I need help to get out. My best advice is take the rope, take his hands, say, God, I need you, and he will totally transform your whole life. Every day is an adventure. Every day is a new day. Like I said in the beginning, my worst day with God is better than my best day without him. You will never regret asking Jesus, like I did when I was that little girl, to come and live in your heart and to fill you. Just know that it's not going to be easy. Being a Christian, believing in Jesus, being filled, being born again, it's not easy, but it is worth it. And there's so much learning. It's just like working out. You know, you're going to go through different phases of changing your body, different phases of getting fit. And it's like that with a relationship with God. Like in the beginning, it's exciting. You have these goals, right? Because, you know, things just seem to be falling into place, and then you have to learn and pivot and know to always ask for help. That's the thing that I think I've realized, is that I just have to ask for help. Whatever area that I'm stuck in, I just need to ask for help. Those are my kids in the background. You guys, that's my testimony. I hope it's blessed you today. If you know somebody that needs to hear this, please share this. Give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, you guys. Hit that notification bell when you want to be so you'll be notified when I do upload new videos. I love you all. I'm so happy I got to share a little bit of my testimony. It still is growing. I'm sure in 10 years it's going to be, I'll be able to share in my marriage journey, because that's a whole other thing. And as a parent and things like that, there's testimonies to that, what God has really done amazing things in my marriage, and I'll share that in a different video. And the things I've had to learn as a wife, as a daughter-in-law, I mean, that whole mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship is a whole other video topic. But I mean, all of us women that are married that have mother-in-laws, there's so much beauty that can come out of that if we choose to love on our mother-in-laws, and we'll go into that in another video. Again, if you have suggestions or if you have questions, please leave them in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them. All this stuff, like links, my social media pages, my emails will be in the show notes below. I love you all, guys. Have an awesome day. Bye.